Hi, I'm Melissa Scott, a young clinical rep with Young Dental. Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast.
These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
So hey, episode 90. Yay.
What?
That's good.
Just crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. But yes, episode 90. Just before Irma brings a bunch of weather, but not nearly as much.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, it did some weird tracking and moving and stuff like that too. So I'm sorry for the people who were like, oh, we won't get hit that bad. Then all of a sudden, boom, they're going to get hit bad. That kind of really sucks a lot.
And we are definitely thinking about all our listeners in Florida because they're going to get beat up. Currently, right now, I think the Keys are getting beat up.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. So
and
best
all
of luck,
the people
everyone.
that are also on fire and anyone that's in Texas dealing with a flood.
There's that one picture that's kind of floating around that says Montana, Washington, Oregon, California, yada, yada, are on fire. These areas are flooding. These areas are tornado watches. This area is hurricanes.
Yep.
This area is earthquake. This area is volcano. Like, just be very careful. Just don't live, everybody. That's kind of what they're saying. You're
screwed somehow or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's just so bizarre.
It is.
We've had a lot of people at work talking about, whether this is going to be the end of times or not. And I'm just like, I just don't
Armageddon.
think it is. Yeah. Like, it's got to be worse than this during Armageddon, if that's something that you believe in.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? Like, it's got to be worse.
I would totally. I envisioned the movie Armageddon.
Yes, exactly. So
I am pretty bummed that I'm not at AAP, which is the American Academy of Periodontology in Boston. A little bummed out by that. I know a lot of people that are going to be there, and I'm missing everyone, so sad. But happy to be home. Yeah.
I am happy to not have to travel anywhere. Well, actually, I did have to travel today up to Seattle, but that's, it's only a 3-hour drive, so it's not that big of a deal. But I haven't had to go anywhere the last 2 weekends, really, and I've enjoyed slowing down, and I don't have anything to do until, I think, when we go to Iowa in a couple weeks, a few weeks.
Sweet.
So, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. When you are on Facebook and we're in our dental hygiene forums,
yes, ma'am,
and you see somebody that posts a question, do you ever read the comments before you answer that question?
I can kind of see where this is going already because I feel like we've had this conversation before. I personally do because I don't want to be redundant. And so unless my comment would reaffirm, like if this says, hey, this is a yes or no question, what do you think? And a bunch of people put yes and a bunch of people no, I'll probably throw in my yes vote or my no vote. But if it's like, hey, are you supposed to sterilize these wrapper up or wrapper down? And everyone's already said my thing, I'll just put a like on the one I agree with.
So I'm trying really hard to understand why I'm so frustrated by this. Because it just baffles me to read. And for instance, let's just say it's that particular topic, wrapper up, wrapper down. And everyone is like, up, down, up, down. I just took an OSHA course. It said up. I just took an OSHA course. It said down. People are just putting like their own thing on there, but they're not reading also the other comments that are like, there is not a set way. It is depending on the manufacturer's instructions. Each autoclave, each statum, everything is going to be different. So you can't just say it is this. But people aren't reading the comments to be like, oh, I never even thought about that. Thanks for letting me know. I'll read my manufacturer's instructions. They're just like, oh, no, it's paper up. You're right. She's right. Totally on that one. Yeah, that's how I do it. I'm like, what the hell? You all sound so stupid. And I'm just trying to I'm trying to understand why I'm so frustrated. And I think it's because we want to, in one hand, lift our profession, but the other hand, we can't be smart enough to read comments to make sure that we aren't sounding stupid. I just don't.
This is why you don't have any friends, Michelle.
This is. Oh my gosh, it drove me insane. I was like, I just can't. Well, and this is also coming off of a few weeks ago when Daniel and I were just literally answering people in GIFs because we were so annoyed by the fact that nobody was reading the evidence-based research that was being posted multiple times. Like, no, you're incorrect. This is the new standard. Nope, you're incorrect. Here's another standard. And eventually it was just us banging our head into the wall via a GIF.
For me, I think it was not to always come back to the podcast, but I really have no idea what's going on in life. Generally, I think a lot of our interviews have really taught me quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I want to say was it Noelle Kelsch that was talking about the instructions for use and how important that is to read them. Because, you can't go on a Facebook group and say, hey, is it this way or this way? Because you're going to get too many answers from, like you said, a bunch of people that are uneducated about it or who, they're very well intentioned. They did just take that course. Yeah. And that person did say do it this way, but that person's wrong.
Yeah. And they again are acting like whoever's on that podium preaches the gospel. Right.
And so kind of taking it all, you got to kind of take it all in and be able to decipher the crap that's out there. But you know what, everyone? Basically what I'm just saying is just listen to our podcast because we have all the best people out there and we're not going to steer you wrong. Mostly.
And I guess that's maybe I need to calm down and not be such a condescending jerk about it either.
Thank you. That's true.
I do. I definitely do. But it's hard to, it's like the more you know.
Yeah.
Should we have that little frustrated
the more
you get?
I
know. More frustrated I get by seeing the same thing over and over again.
Well, I think a lot of these people that are like reposting these questions, like at first it kind of was driving me crazy because it happened in Hygiene Town a lot too, back in the day when I was doing that a lot. And I'd be like, we just answered this question. And then I was the jerkwad that would post the link to the other thread that we talked about it on. And so...
since you can't search, here, let me do it for you.
Right. I would say stupid things like that. And that's really just not great. So I think the people that are reposting these questions are maybe new to the group or, maybe new to dentistry, new to life. I don't know what they are new to, but I feel like they missed the first one around and it's our, it's our job, I think, to continue to try and educate and help them the best we freaking can. Even if it does get tiring and annoying, like we have to, Michelle. That's what we're supposed to do. So
just be happy they're asking the question at all.
Yeah, because you can still get mad at all the responders, but don't get mad at the question.
No, I definitely don't want to get mad at the question because you're right. It is at least that they're asking, and we still ask questions that are probably really dumb to some other people.
I was listening to some of the ones that I was editing this week, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Andrew, you're an idiot. Can you please edit that out? I'm like, no, I guess not. I'm going to leave that one in.
We have to be transparent.
You have to look like an idiot in front of everybody. So.
Well, thanks for helping me work through my frustration. I'm not as frustrated, but I was getting so annoyed.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel better, the Gamecocks won yesterday.
They did 2-0.
So
maybe we don't suck as much this year.
Oh no, you still do, but it's just
your mouth.
Well, we'll see. But here's the thing, I was just so happy to be able to see it on TV that I actually watched a lot of it.
How come you could see it on TV where you are?
Remember, in the spirit of we're not judging each other anymore, or questions or listeners or answers or anything like that. I may or may not have upgraded during football season to a lot more channels.
Oh.
And they may or may not have a crap ton of sports channels now.
Like SEC channel and stuff?
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at one time there was 8 college games going on. And this is awesome. So
I kind of wonder what I did before football season. I don't know what my Saturdays look like. That was only 2 weeks ago, but I still don't remember.
You were working and doing
that's right.
your at conferences and this is actually kind of convenient because you don't have to travel quite as much, during football season. It seems like there's not as many conferences.
Kind of. I'll be gone next week. I'd leave for to go to AOSH. Very excited about that. That's this coming weekend. So I'll be in Salt Lake City with all you smart oral systemic health minded people.
I have nothing to say to that. I will not be there.
You will not. Well,
That's all I have to say about that. Whoa. All right. Our interview today is Ann Marie DePalma. It is a great interview. I listened to it already. Oh, so good.
I'm so glad we finally had her on the podcast. I think it was like a year ago. I was like, we want you on the podcast. And then she even did an article like from the podium for you and I at one point.
Yeah.
And, we were just like, we really need to have her on. And it was like a whim. Like that morning, we're like, don't you want to be on the podcast today? And it worked for her schedule. And it was wonderful. So we are so grateful to have her on and have her just tell us all the things that she knows.
Well, and it's interesting because I think that, her journey is very much like the rest of ours. And I think that you can actually identify with this a lot too. She was having some TMD issues.
Oh, yeah.
And so, when she kind of was researching it, then she started writing about it. And then that's kind of how kicked off her whole career, is because she wanted to know something about a specific issue that she was having. Mm-hmm. And then it just broadened her mind, and then she started sharing it. And she says multiple times in this episode, if you guys have any questions, reach out to her. Like if you want to learn how to write better or whatever, just reach out to her. She's really open and really loving.
Yes. But it's a theme that we saw multiple themes at RDH under one roof. And one of them was, everyone's journeys kind of came from something personal and something that impacted them in a way. And they kind of just expanded on that, which was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're all on the journey together.
Yep.
But I think that's why we're doing this podcast, is kind of figure it out for ourselves too. So we appreciate her. We appreciate you listeners, and we hope you guys enjoy this interview. Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine. All right. On that note of Andrew being dumb, here we are, day 2 again of RDH under one roof. Interview number 3 for the morning. So we're still kind of fresh.
Yeah, we got you.
And we're still kind of fresh. Yeah, you are. And we appreciate that you were able to find some time, because we talked about doing this before and it just didn't work out. Life happened. But so before we go into this anymore, tell us who you are, what you do.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ann Marie DePalma. I am from Boston. I live in the suburbs just north of Boston. And so I do park my car.
I was going to say, I can't hear that accent at all. Nothing.
Oh, really? I've been a hygienist for many years. I practiced clinically for about 25 years in both general and perio practices. Never say never. Because when I was in hygiene school, I'm a graduate of Forsyth, nice. I swore up and down I would never work in perio. But that's where I spent most of my clinical career. And I learned so much. I truly learned how to be a hygienist in the perio practice. It wasn't until probably about 5 years after graduating that I really knew what I was doing.
I would agree with that. I would totally agree with that. You think and then it's like after 5 years you look back and go, I did so much wrong, or if I could go back and redo it, now I'm just figuring it out.
That's right. It's almost like the light bulb goes off.
Not to scare new grads or hygienists or anything, but 5 years is reasonable.
You got to put in your time.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I worked in general practices for a number of years, and then I ended up in perio. And through perio, I learned a lot about implants, so I'm very involved in the implant side. Transitioned from clinical into education. I love teaching. I taught in dental hygiene, dental assisting programs for a few years, and then transitioned into my current position, where I am a technology advisor for Patterson Dental. I train offices on EagleSoft.
Oh, very nice. I like EagleSoft. What do you use?
Oh, I grew up on Dentrix.
Yeah.
But perio, I feel like every perio office I worked in, I had Dentrix. But now I'm attempting, and all the EagleSoft is there, so I'm learning
Good.
a lot about EagleSoft, and most of the time I'm calling, I'm like, well, and I also didn't do restorative like ever, so I was like, you want a class 5? Okay, 1 minute. I'm almost there. Okay, I got it now. I'm good.
So does that take you traveling then?
Traveling locally a lot, but I wear a number of hats in dental hygiene. One of which is I also write for RDH magazine, and
Which is why you probably know her name, folks.
Yes.
That's right.
If you were like, where do I know her name from?
I go into many offices, and one of the first things they'll ask me is, I know you from somewhere. And I'll ask if they're a hygienist, and sure enough, they get RDH, or they've seen my writing somewhere along the line or online or somewhere, and that's how we start a conversation. It builds my rapport with the offices. But it was very interesting how I got into writing. One of the things many years ago when I was in elementary school, one of my teachers, before I even knew what I wanted to do with my life, said I'd make a good writer.
Oh, nice.
And over the years, it never really took off. But during my clinical career, I developed TMD. I developed a very severe form of TMD where eventually I needed to have my right disc removed, and have had several other surgeries and other things involved with my TMJ. And when I was first diagnosed, I wanted to learn more about my condition and what was going on. So I started researching. And when I did the research, I'm a pretty well-educated person, but I couldn't understand what it was saying. It was all written at a more higher level than what I was accustomed to. So I said, if I'm having issues trying to find this, what about other people? What about other hygienists? What about the lay person that's experiencing a similar situation? So I did a little bit more research and started writing and contacted Mark Hartley, and over the years we kept up a relationship and was writing other things, and I ended up in 2001 writing a column or approaching Mark with an idea about a column called From the Podium, which was all about continuing education. And because I love the education piece of dental hygiene. So I interview people who are new to speaking, who are established speakers, and just get the word out there about their programs. I also do a number of different other feature programs or feature articles for the magazine, as well as through my writing, I have developed my own basic library of continuing education courses. So from my personal experiences, I have information on implants, TMD, developmental delays in children, recognizing those for hygienists, practice management. So there's a number of different topics that I cover on my own as a continuing ed speaker.
And so how long have you been doing the speaking side of it?
Probably about over 15 years.
Yeah. So for the writing side of it, because I have written, I don't like it. Like it's just not like an enjoyable thing for me. Someone will say like, you're fine writing, like it sounds fine, but it takes a lot for it to get to being okay. And I do think that is a necessary step to get your name out there and to be somewhere in the circuit if you want to get outside of just doing clinical. I don't want to say just doing clinical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People have to know who you are. They have to understand that you have a passion for what you're doing. And a lot of people say, I don't have anything to talk about, or I don't have anything to write about. Yes, you do. You're looking at things differently than someone else in another operatory would look at it.
And would you say, so I spoke to somebody this morning, actually, they were like, how do you find your topics? And I was like, well, just because the topic was written about it doesn't mean it covered it full-heartedly or gave all the different sides of it. So
Correct.
if it's, ergonomics, we could talk about ergonomics. How many people write articles on ergonomics? Because there's always a little something that might apply to you that the other one didn't.
every person has a different take on every topic. And even for me, there are a number of topics that people speak about that I speak about, but I'm coming from a different angle, different perspective, different viewpoints. We all share what we can have in our lives.
It's true. It's true. So, do you have any helpful writing tips for people that are like trying? They're like, maybe I should write an article.
Just put it on paper.
Just start writing, right?
Just put it down. I'd be available to, look at people's writings, to review it, critique it.
Well, that's very generous, because I think that was my scary part of it. Well, one, I got eaten alive by another magazine, and I was like, never again, never again. It wasn't even like helpful criticism. It was just like, let me just get out my red pen and destroy you as a human being. Like, it was terrible. So it's like I never wanted to approach anybody that had your kind of status within an article or a magazine, because I was like, well, what if they hate it? Now this prestigious person that writes all the time is going to think so poorly of me. But I really think also a lot of the people like yourself and all the people that we ever interview, because I think everyone is super approachable and willing. And if you're not able, at least you maybe direct them to the right person.
What are some of the questions that maybe people should be asking themselves when they're trying to find what they're passionate about writing?
I just ask them a series of questions. I'll go through, personal issues, things that they've experienced. And then from there, you find your passion. So, for example, I started with my TMD because it was where I was. I have 2 sons now who are adult sons, but when they were younger, they had issues with speech and language and developmental delays. And I grew from my experience from that. So things not only in your clinical aspects, but other aspects of your life, too.
Well, I mean, we keep preaching that, the body doesn't start at the tonsils, the mouth doesn't start, before that. So there are things that we can be incorporating and that we might be experiencing in our personal life that could help another hygienist see it in the chair.
So where you choose your passion, is it clinically? Yes. Okay, great. If it's something related to dental hygiene, but it's outside of the box, look beyond the box. Don't just be saying, okay, yep, I know ergonomics, or I have this, or I have that. Just go somewhere else.
Do you find that people are a little bit afraid to go outside of what I learned in school, or going outside the box? Are people afraid to write about that?
Very much so.
Why?
I don't know. It may even be just the fear of change and thinking about.
Or being chastised for thinking outside of the box, I think, is a lot of fear.
Right. You're a bad girl or you're a bad guy, whatever. You're supposed to follow the rules. And if you don't follow the rules...
We've always done it this way. Why would you want to do it that way?
Right. In any of my courses and when I'm doing actual training, I talk about change. And one of the things I talk about is whenever we're forced to look at change, whether that be a good change or a bad change, our inner 2-year-old comes out.
Temper
And what happens with an inner 2-year-old? They start stomping and screaming and whatever.
It's like cognitive dissonance to the nth degree at that point.
That's right. So I think that's why people are often afraid of actually putting their thoughts down. Because I have to change and I have to think about myself and think about hygiene.
Well, I would say even my personal, really new in the writing, and this, I think my first article was 5 years ago or something like that. So not very long ago, but I was so new in the research and I knew I wanted to learn and learn and learn, but I hadn't traveled the country and gone to all these lectures and heard what was happening on the West Coast and whatever. So it's like, if I put myself out there, and from my little bubble of South Carolina, what's going to happen?
What if I fail?
Yeah, and all these people see it. What if I am so behind the times, and people in California are like, "Oh, you stupid girl! We've been doing that for years." It's a fear. It really is.
It is a fear. There was one time, or actually a couple of times that early in my speaking career, I did not get very good reviews, and it happens. Everyone. So I was like, oh no, this is the end of it. I'm done.
Right.
But then you learn from that and you take it to the next level.
Well, we talked about this yesterday with another speaker.
There's a theme going on.
Yeah,
there.
it's like you're gonna get knocked down.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that if you're trying to step outside and do anything, you're going to get knocked down, and it's just a matter of having the tenacity to get back up and learn from it, or challenge that person that's like, no, actually, I think you're the one that's wrong. But just being humble enough to say, okay, well, tell me
what I did wrong. What can I make better?
Lynn Slim actually just was at my course in Georgia, and she has like a list of things, and she was like, I would love to sit down and tell you, I liked how you presented it, but I think you could do this. And I was like, what you want? Can we do a conference call right now? Like, what do you need? But that's nice, though, to have those people that are going to be like, here's where you did well, and this is where I think you could deliver it in a different way or make more of an impact, or maybe just understand it a little bit better, because I think you're missing this element.
I like that they care enough to be honest.
Right. Or even care enough to not... We talk about mean girls in this profession quite a lot, and how that's an issue, and how we run across it. Well, Andrew, I mean, they love Andrew.
Guys,
like, he's like the novelty of the friggin' dental profession. But, the mean girl, like, mentality, and being kind of bullied, or this is mine, don't try to, like, I talk about this topic, this isn't, I'm the expert, like, but I want, you're going to leave at some point, right?
Right.
We need to cultivate more speakers and more people who are willing to learn. And so when you come across somebody that's like, yeah, send me your stuff, like, it's just like, what, really? Because you do get beat down a little bit in this.
And that's one of actually, I'm developing a new program on communication and front versus back, and how we see the mean girl in the office.
Yes.
There's always some, the back is saying, the clinical team is saying one thing, and the business team is saying something else. And how do you deal with that? So it's a new program. We'll see where it goes.
I think it's going to be so needed, though.
Yeah.
Absolutely needed, because that is. It's like the bickering. It's why you don't want to come to work sometimes. And I used to say that all the time. Like, I love what I do at the end of the day, but not every day is a good day. And it wasn't because the patients were always bad,
right,
but it was because I said this morning, like, how many times are they going to yell at me for my instruments being in the sink? Like, literally, I'm 15 minutes behind. I have 4 charts to write up and, like, an SRP to set up for. Like, I don't give a crap about these stupid instruments right now. But that is it. That's where that comes. And conflict resolution is just one thing that we aren't taught, really, at all.
And as women, sorry, Andrew.
Yes.
No, I'm good. You just keep going.
We want everybody to be our friends and to work well with each other, but some people just don't.
And we take it personally, too, sometimes.
Right. And how do you get around that?
So have you written a decent amount about this? Or
No, because it's fairly new.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hopefully start getting a little bit more involved with that.
I think it's needed, though.
Yeah.
It's absolutely... Well, when we talk about, like, I don't know how to be a guy in a thing of 15 women or something like that, I'd probably run screaming.
Right.
Well, I mean, Mike and I were, this is my brother Mike, you met him last night. So we were the only 2 guys in our hygiene program. One, we had each other to lean on, and I think you're right. Being an only guy in that situation would be maybe a little bit different, maybe a little bit hard. But as we kind of have grown up now and we've been in the industry for a little while, it's no different than probably a lot of other circumstances when whether you're playing sports, like co-ed sports, or whether you're at church and whatever. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of situations where you're going to be kind of singled out or whatever. It's not, I don't know. I find it fine. I don't think the women are mean to me, and I'm good to go. And
the dynamics are changing with females being half of the dentist graduating, and
dental school graduates are mostly women now.
And so I think it's going to change, and we need to learn how to function in an office together for the greater good of the patients.
When you go, I'm going to change subjects a little bit. When you go to, you said you want to take some courses and stuff while you're here. What types of things are you looking at? Because as a speaker, then I know you don't want to like emulate anyone else, but first of all, do you ever get worried about like, oh, I'm going to start sounding like that person if I keep listening to how they present this topic?
No, actually, that's a good point, because one of the areas that I speak on is implants, and the original program was from the International Congress of Oral International Congress of Oral Implantologists and the Association of Dental Implant Auxiliaries. And when I first learned about the program, I was working for a periodontist at the time who was placing implants. He was doing research at one of the dental schools in Boston, and he wanted to bring implants into the practice, and I learned all about it. And the program that I attended was put on by a provider who was a certified educator with the association, and she had one way of doing it, and it was great and worked well with her. And then she brought on several other educators, and we all took the exact same program and made it our own.
Nice. Very nice.
So that's what I think about for other people as well, for the other programs. Yes, I'm going to look at a couple of implant programs. I'm going to look at, I did an earlier program this morning. So I'm going to be looking at it in terms of content, but yet, what did they do that I can incorporate? Did they move around the room? Did they make good eye contact? Did they have a little bit of humor in the right places? Those types of things.
Do you feel like, because you're so well known, that the speakers, when they see her in the room, they're like, ooh, is she going to steal some of my stuff? Yeah. Do you feel like there's a competition at all with that?
No. But I know that does happen. And it almost goes back to the Mean Girls, because we're all here to learn and to share. We're here to help each other. But if you're not going to take the material and give it, I have information in a lot of my programs that I have learned from other speakers, but I always give them reference.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the slide, I will say courtesy of whoever.
Right.
And that's the way I was taught. That's the way I know that is the right thing to do.
Right. Because it's two different things. Research is research. Like, we could all be reading the same thing and presenting it like that. That's not taking. Maybe there's a study I was like, oh, I didn't know that existed, and so now I incorporate that into my presentation. Versus me just kind of hijacking your slides, and like if you came up with your own chart, if your own flow chart, your own animations. I mean, I've done things where like Tracy Butler taught me how to like take the research study, and she's like, show me where it came from. Don't just quote it to me, show it. So now I like show the actual picture of the study, and then I pull these clips from it. I don't think that's necessarily like, if you,
that's not bad.
That's super visual, and
right.
People pick up on it. But if you do it, you take it and it makes it work for your particular theme in your presentation. I don't think, I think it's just when you take someone's slide and you're like, yeah, isn't this great? Or the pictures or something like, yeah, I saw this patient at 3 months, blah, blah, blah. Like,
it's not my patient. In reality, it was your patient or whatever.
Exactly. It becomes a different story. But I do think it's when you kind of lift up others, like courtesy of, or I think acknowledging that you aren't the expert in something. Like, I am learning about glycine air polishing. I will never claim to be the expert, but I'm going to talk about it and how in the research I'm finding that that's going to be the new standard of biofilm removal around implants.
Correct.
I am not going to tell you that I've actually used glycine air polishing because I haven't. I want it. If somebody wants to give me air polishing, I would love to use it, but I don't because I'm in an outreach program. Like, it's just we don't have that ability. So I'm not going to like say I know all the things. I'm like, but you should take this course because I learned a lot of little things. And if you want to get better at this, these are the people that are teaching that right now. I think that's
Same
where
with
it is.
me. I don't speak on I'm not the expert on clinical topics because I'm not doing clinical anymore. But yet I know where to put you. I know what direction to
Right.
lead you. So yeah.
Which is nice because you learn so much from your columns, I would imagine. How do you find people for that column from the podium?
Attending courses, looking at things people have actually written. Okay. Word of mouth. People send me people that they have heard. So a variety of sources.
Okay. Are there any things that you're hearing out in the research world, writing or reading, going to the podiums that you're just like, either this is going to take off, this is going to be a new trend, or like this piques my interest personally?
The glycine.
The glycine, right? I would agree.
Because that's my...
We're right there on that question. I was going to ask you about how you felt about early adoption and because the glycine thing is like, okay, I feel like there's enough research now that it's solid, right?
And it's been in Europe for so long now.
But prior to that, though, when you see these new articles or these new topics being presented, how do you feel about them? Are you an early adopter, or do you let me see a little bit more research?
I want to
hear
see
it a
the
few
research. I want to see, not just company research. I want to see, the systematic reviews.
Right.
Years ago, a company was proposing a new implant instrument. They asked me to be involved with it. But they were showing me the research that was only their company. I want to see outside of your company.
Right.
Give me some feedback.
So the glycine air polishing, I think, is also something that's going to be, because,
I've incorporated it definitely into my programs, my implant programs. Yes.
I first heard about it probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think maybe Karen Davis was the one I heard it from originally. And I'm a huge air polisher. Being in perio, chlorhexidine stain has haunted my dreams every day, and root surface stain, all that kind of stuff. So I was a huge air polish, sodium bicarbonate air polisher. So when I heard about this, I was like, what? Say again, what? Yeah. But again, we just don't have the technology. But I talk to also in a lot of my presentations about the research, evidence-based research and practice is what you have, what's available to you, versus what the research is saying and the actual patient's needs. And so if you don't necessarily have glycine air polishing, just understanding the importance of biofilm removal and how you could make that happen around implants or whatever it is. Because I think that's more of the future. We're not looking at shaving teeth down with scalers much anymore.
Right. Over time, once we really, glycine really takes off, I see it as not even having to pick up a scaler to touch an implant. Because this is going to be the way of removing the biofilm.
Right.
So that whole issue of do we use metal, do we use plastic, all of that is going to eventually go by the wayside because this is going to be the standard of care for it.
Yeah, totally agree.
I feel like there's an investment that's going to be needed, just like the changing from to digital X-rays or whatever for offices.
Yeah.
Technology is changing in dentistry, and dental practices, dental teams have to understand that it's an investment. That do you have the same cell phone you had a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago? So technology is moving quickly. We have to keep up with that. And patients coming into practices are looking at, does this office have technology? How are they using it? And in order for a practice to grow, it needs to stay with the times and let their patients, know that they're using the latest. You maybe not on the early adopting side, but be part of the movement. And that the dentists and the practice have to understand that this investment, technology is an investment.
So do you have then some suggestions for those hygienists that are literally going against, I'm already at 70% overhead, you're not producing much, like more than your 30%. Like I'm not buying new things because how will that would then put me over my 70%? Like how can they?
What I want to know from the hygienist is, are they keeping track of their own numbers? We have software, whether that be EagleSoft, whether it be Dentrix, whether it be any of the others that are out there. Can they go and figure out what their actual numbers are? I do a report when I go into a number of offices where I look at the hygiene production and the hygiene perioprophy percentages. And I am amazed at most offices are only at 1 or 2% of perio percent.
But 50% of our population has perio.
True, and that's what I tell offices. So when we run these reports, where's your production? Why are you always just coding a prophy?
Because that's what the insurance pays for.
That's what the insurance pays for, but then we're going to get into, are we treating the patient?
Right.
Well, and I think people get, and Patty talks about this all the time, that, these are not... they're kind of, we don't have diagnosis codes, so this is kind of a diagnosis code. And you have to do that. Like in medicine, they don't call it a hip replacement when you get a knee replacement because insurance is going to pay for whatever, So we need to start to understand that. But we're also damn emotional and timid, and the pushback from the patient.
I can't, because the patient's going to say, my insurance isn't going to pay for it.
And the doctor's going to be mad at us if we run our patients off because they're going to go somewhere else who will do that. And there's a lot of excuses. On the back end of those reports, can I ask about, does a hygienist, we'll do specifically for EagleSoft because that's what you're familiar with, specifically, does the hygienist have to be given rights to access those reports? Or
there are certain reports that they may be able to. There are certain reports that they may not be able to. It's practice specific. But they should be able to figure out their production at the end of the day. What is their collection at the end of the day? There's a difference. If it's a high insurance practice, they could be producing $1,000, but because it's a high insurance, they're only collecting $200 or $300 of that. That's an extreme example, but there's a lot of things that the hygienist on the business end doesn't realize and understand. And so when they go to the doctor and say, I need to have more instruments, or I want a raise, or I want something, the dentist is looking at it as a business side. And that's what hygienists need to understand, that the hygiene practice is a business within a business. No, I'm not saying push production.
Right.
You don't want to do that. If the patient needs something, you look at the patient and you figure out what needs to be done. For example, if they're an older patient, are they having dry mouth, or do they have implants? Do they need XYZ done? Whatever. You're not pushing treatment where it's not needed, but yet you're looking towards the holistic patient. It's all about that individual patient at that moment in time.
Right.
What does their mouth look like?
Which, as students, you go through all the classifications of this, X, Y, and Z. And I feel like a lot of times when we get out of school, we talked about this yesterday too, when we get out of school, we're like, finally we don't have to do that because no one's looking over our shoulder. We don't have to classify anybody. I feel like the two diagnosis code, the two codes, the diagnosis code and then the treatment code, is probably the way to solve this.
Yeah, it's going to take some time because dentistry is afraid of change. So that inner 2-year-old's going to come back up. And we're so slow, but it's going to come.
Yeah.
And when I talk to offices, they look at me with the deer in the headlight look. What are we going to do? Why are we going to do this? But it's coming.
Well, and I would also, so this morning, actually I went to bed and posted something on Facebook, which is just never smart. And I woke up to the response of it, which it wasn't bad.
What did you say?
It wasn't bad. But she was talking about I think I'm not going to pay my ADHA fees anymore because I'm not seeing any changes, and I blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I know this person. I'm like, I haven't actually seen you do anything. Like, where are you in this? So if you want to see a change, I was like,
be the solution.
Yeah. I was like, you know what really pisses me off too is when people don't vote and then complain about the government. This is essentially what you're doing. Like, if you make waves, if you want to see change, like, get involved. Stop. You're like.
Just stop going, gack.
I'm putting.
And just do something about it.
Right.
I've had people send me their resumes because they wanted to get out of clinical hygiene. So I've made suggestions about tweaking their resume and doing this. And then I never hear back from them because they don't want to take that step because they're afraid of the change.
Yeah.
They're afraid. Yes, they want to get out of doing whatever they're currently doing, but they're not willing.
Because we want to get away from the monotony, but it scares us to not have a routine.
True.
It scares us to not have that cyclical thing. Like, I know what's coming today. I know the patients I'm seeing today. I know the procedures I'm doing. This is the way that I polish. First is then scale, and then this is like you get into that like rhythm, and it's sometimes scary.
I don't know if that's a personality issue or is that how we're trained as hygienists.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
Well, I think it's probably. Probably how we're trained. I mean, honestly, because
I think so.
they kind of beat it into you in the schools. I mean, I know I do. My students sometimes. So, any words of wisdom or pearls or little things that new grads or students, like, you want them to know, or just advice for them coming out?
Be open to change.
Amen. Yeah. And does everybody have these little stickers that say change on them?
Change on the badge.
Yes.
Figure out what your passion is. Whether that be clinical, for some people, staying in clinical their entire career is great. For other people, they're looking for something else. But find where your passion is. What excites you about getting up in the morning? You know, why do I get up out of bed to go to work?
Yeah.
I agree. Totally agree.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for your time today. I'm so glad that our worlds collided.
Finally, we've gotten able to do this. Yes.
And it wasn't even planned. That's the best part.
That's right.
Like literally at 8 o'clock this morning.
Happen.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
If any more listeners wanted to contact you, would you be willing to?
Yep.
What kind of contact information can you give them?
My email address is Ann Marie RDH amrdh@aol.com.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing
thank
this.
you.
You're the best.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the meeting.
Perfect.
Listeners, I want to tell you a story. A story I found on the web, which makes this Scaling the Web with Andrew. So for this week on Scaling the Web with Andrew, I want to talk about how the media and how the public view dental professionals, and sometimes kind of how unfair it is and what we can do about it. Many of you have heard your patients come in and say, no offense, but I kind of hate you guys. No offense, I really hate the dentist. And we all have cute ways of saying, oh, no, I'm just a hygienist, so it's okay, we can be best friends or whatever. But it kind of is unfair. I had a patient say that this week to one of the dental assistants and also to one of the dentists, and they haven't been in it as long as some of us have, and they're like, oh no, that's fine, I just rolled right off my back. And I was like, no, let's correct them. Let's how do you talk to a patient and tell them that it's not okay in a way that's not going to be confrontational or passive aggressive? One of the ways I wanted to illustrate this was from an article that was written back in July of 2015. As many of you remember, Cecil the lion was shot by a dentist a few years back, and all of the news stories focused on how it was a dentist that shot the lion. They talked about how they were overpaid and how we should be, as an educated professional, we shouldn't be shooting lions and things like that. I don't want to get into whether or not it was right or wrong or anything like that. Okay, because that's not for me to judge. It's not for probably a lot of us to judge. We can have an opinion, but that's not what this Scaling the Web is going to be about. one of the things that was interesting that came about from all of that was the Google reviews for that dentist's office. They got thousands of 1-star reviews, negative comments, and Yelp reviews, and they weren't even patients. The public was outraged at this dentist, and so they wanted to get back at this person by doing these things that were not right, in my opinion, by going on and telling everyone, the whole world, what a terrible dentist he was when they don't really know his clinical skills. Alan Mead, one of our friends, he's a dentist out of Saginaw, Michigan, and he has a blog on meadfamilydental.com, and he wrote about this specifically. I mean, I'll put the link in the show notes. I really don't care about the article itself. It's very well written, kind of making the same point of, I'm not going to make, he's not saying whether it was right or wrong, but why does everyone focus on the dentist? If you read through the comments, there's a lot of dentists that are saying, hey, thank you for pointing this out. Thank you for standing on our side. And then there's a lot of public opinion that said, that person was wrong, that person was terrible, and they kind of missed the whole point of the article. Some people accused Dr. Mead of using it as advertisement and things like that. They missed the whole point. Well, I wanted to fast forward to this year, July 21st, 2017. There was a CNN article that came out that said 2 years after Cecil the lion's death, son Xanda killed by game hunter. If you go through the article, it talks about how they'd been tracking Xanda for many years. They've known him since he was a cub. They said in the article, according to the source familiar with the hunt, the safari was led by a professional hunter whose client was a Spanish national. The source said the hunt was a legal expedition and the outfitter had been properly registered. They didn't really talk about his profession. They didn't talk about anything about the person that killed Xanda. At the very end of the article, they mentioned in July 2015, 13-year-old Cecil was lured out of the park boundary with food, shot with a crossbow, tracked for 40 hours, then finished off with a gun, according to authorities. The big cat was skinned and the head reportedly cut off as a trophy. The killer, Minnesota dentist Walter Palmer, his professional hunter guide, and the owner of the land where the hunt took place were initially accused of an illegal hunt under the country's Parks and Wildlife Act. A decision was made later not to press charges against Palmer. So again, they said the killer, Minnesota dentist Walter Palmer. They didn't say Minnesota native, Minnesota resident, Minnesota whatever, or American Walter Palmer, similar to the Spanish national. My point is, for all of these things, the public has decided to always have a negative image of dental professionals. It is our responsibility to gently guide and correct them to truth. It's very hard. It's an uphill battle that's going to be very, very hard to fight. But similar to the people that came out and said, well, I read an article that said flossing isn't necessary anymore. And our responses to that was, yes, it is. And educating them on why the media got it wrong. We need to educate our patients to embrace oral health and embrace our profession as the front lines to not only oral, but systemic health.
It's about that time. Grab your blanket and a glass of wine. It's story time with Michelle.
Story Time with Michelle is brought to you while drinking a lovely glass of Whispering Angel Rosé, one of my favorite rosés. If you have not tried it, it's worth the little bit higher price tag for the bottle compared to, let's say, Trader Joe's or something, but delicious. And I will say, you could drink a lot of it and not really hate yourself tomorrow. So enjoy, everyone. And we are going to be finishing up the final chapter of communication skills for dental health care providers. This is chapter 12, Managing Stigma Challenges. So why planning for stigma challenges matters. Chapter 3 addressed the topic of cultural competent communication, and one section explored stigma as a cultural embedded phenomenon. In other words, the physical or behavioral characteristics that are stigmatized vary from one culture to another, or even from one social context to another within a culture. In the past century, healthcare has made some great strides towards becoming a stigma-free context for patients. Although not eliminated, discrimination by healthcare workers against homosexuality, obese, or mentally ill patients is not as common as it once was. Yet perceptions of stigma persist even within the healthcare field. For instance, a 2002 study found that only 22% of medical students with depression sought help, and 30% cited the stigma associated with help seeking as a barrier. The tenets of a patient-centered care patient-centered care require that all patients be treated with respect, both because human dignity demands it and because effective treatment is compromised when stigmatized patients are unwilling to trust their providers. The research literature provides ample evidence that many stigmatized patients would rather suffer from mental illness, incontinence, HIV, and multiple other problems rather than disclose them to a healthcare worker. And we have all seen that where patients, and this is why we have universal healthcare or universal precautions, because we don't know who is going to tell us that they are dealing with maybe, let's say, a communicable disease. A culture shift toward more openness, yet physical and mental illness is facilitating care in advanced nations. Yet stigmatization attitudes are widespread in some developing nations and even among a minority of dental providers in the United States. For instance, when dental and dental hygiene students were asked about obese patients, 17% said that it was difficult to feel empathy for them, and 14% were uncomfortable examining them. Larger proportions of these students had negative attitudes about obese patients, either perceiving them as lazy and lacking willpower, and felt uncomfortable discussing dietary habits and appetite suppressant use. For several reasons, providers of dental care should work to make every patient relationship free of stigma. First, all healthcare providers have a professional obligation to treat all patients with dignity and respect, and this professionalism requires that the provider minimize or eliminate negative personal attitudes towards patient characteristics or behaviors. Second, many stigmatized characteristics or behaviors, such as HIV or eating disorders, are a cause or consequence of poor oral health. Therefore, oral health workers must be prepared to address them. Third, even stigmatized conditions that have no obvious connection to oral health may affect oral health. For instance, major depressive disorder is often associated with rampant decay, and medication used to treat it can magnify associated xerostomia. Finally, the type of communication advocate in the manual fosters patient disclosure of sensitive personal information, so providers should be prepared to respond to disclosures of stigmatized conditions. Research indicates that both patient-centered communication and the length of time spent with the patient are associated with increases in patient trust. Furthermore, patients who perceive providers as simultaneously trustworthy, competent, and objective may seek help from providers rather than friends and family, who may be too judgmental or emotionally invested. Ultimately, stigmatized conditions affect oral health, and oral health problems often cannot be treated effectively until more pressing non-oral health problems are dealt with. So we're going to look at the chapter checklist here. And it starts with overcoming barriers. And so we want to prepare for common stigmatized conditions and have a ready response for unexpected stigmatized conditions. We want to overcome embarrassment about a patient's medical conditions. Never assume that a patient is embarrassed simply because you are embarrassed. And never assume that a patient will react negatively if you address a stigmatized condition. Discuss unhealthy behaviors in a way that does not disparage the culture of the patient. And when you want to address these stigmatized conditions, you want to find the right time and in the right way. Keep an array of resources and referral options ready for a wide range of stigmatized conditions. Maintain a supply of brochures for options and for common conditions, and list for specialists for consultation. Oh my gosh, y'all. Remain part of the healthcare team that facilitates a patient's recovery, and in most cases address stigmatized conditions during the treatment planning phase. You want to react casually to a patient's disclosures or discovery of a stigmatized condition by observation or examination. Do not assume that the patient perceives the stigmatized condition the same way you do. And when a patient discloses a stigmatized condition, respond with a back channel response and proceed with the next question, or respond with a casual request for more information. So you want to confirm that the non-response was not an oversight. You want to state how the question relates to oral health. Never force an answer the patient is reluctant to provide. And never reprimand a patient for changing a response. Casually ask about the change and document the nonverbal response and ask the patient about it. You want to note observations and symptoms with concern. Never ignore unhealthy conditions or behaviors, and refer the patient immediately to a specialist. Discuss aspects of the condition that relates to oral health. Emphasize that the condition requires care coordinated among professionals, and keep contact information on hand and give the specialist contact information to the patient along with information on treatment. And they go on to talk about when we're handling certain types of patients. So smoking patients, substance abusing patients, intimate partner violence, addressing and identifying that. And then also, that kind of is it. Just identifying and addressing that partner violence, which I can't imagine. I'm very excited to read this full chapter. So that is the end of communication skills for dental health care providers. I highly suggest picking this up. And also going back to some of our episodes and also checking out Jasmine Haley's course on cultural competence. She's got a lot of good information that is something that we as healthcare providers definitely need to tackle. But you can start with getting this book, and I hope you've enjoyed Storytime with Michelle as we've gone through all the different chapters. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, share the podcast with friends. We would love your help in spreading the word. We want iTunes reviews. Even if you're using Google Play or Stitcher, you can also review us there. And just thanks again, guys, for supporting us and helping us get these great interviews. We do love your suggestions, and we always love your interaction on Facebook. If that's a message to us directly, or if those are comments on the podcast, or even if that's comments on other sites like some of the hygiene forums, feel free to share there if you liked a particular episode or if an episode helped you. That recently happened with one of our great listeners, Kate, on Jocelyn's episode. She saw a patient who was on the autistic spectrum, and she used some of the tips and tricks that Jocelyn talked about. And we really appreciate that feedback, Kate. That made all of our day to hear that has helped you, because that's all we've ever wanted for this podcast. So again, please continue to share with your friends. Let us know your thoughts and feelings, and give us great tips for upcoming interviews. And we can't wait to meet all of you, but don't forget to like us and review us on iTunes. Have a great week, y'all. Bye.